I get the sense from the conversation we kind of came into this with that maybe you don't think much of this conversation around Nanaia Mahuta's husband. We're going to talk about it, but are you thinking beat up? Is that where you're sitting on this? I got a very quick sense, so I'm not putting words in your mouth because I'm not. If that's the case, I'm not there with you.
Yeah. No, look, I'm going to take a middle ground here. I think it's a right-wing beat up. I think it's quite hard to be like, the thing with Māori is that they're so interlinked. Like, I think if you were a prominent Māori, you could throw a rock and hit a family member.
Right.
Sort of thing.
So hang on, just so people know, what you're saying is there was a board or a selection committee or a panel of 5 people, 3 of which were involved in the Mahuta family. That's what you're saying?
Oh, was it 3? Okay, I didn't. If that was the case, I didn't know. But yeah, it's. I think it's something that was thrown out there. I think people have latched onto it. It probably does deserve an investigation to make sure that everything's above board. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think it's a bit of a right-wing beat-up, personally, because she's got some pretty prominent portfolios, and, you know, it's a bit of targeted sort of, let's see if we poke this spot and see what happens.
Well, let's have a look at the actual situation and see what people then think. You guys are welcome to mention this in the comments while I'm doing some reading. Chewy, maybe you can have a look through the comments and see if there's anything that you want to star there. So Nanaia Mahuta wants the investigation into handling of husbands' governmental contracts. The Public Service Commission has agreed to investigate the handling of government contracts given to Minister Nanaia Mahuta's husband, Gunnan Ormsby, I'm going to go with. Questions about contracts awarded to Ormsby's firm Ka Awatea Services, KAS, by 4 government agencies have continued to be raised in recent months. By the way, this is from stuff.co.nz if you're listening. The Commission on Wednesday confirmed in a letter to the National Party it would look into the handling of any conflicts of interest after requests from the party, Minister Chris Hipkins and Mahuta herself. It's concerned me for some time, even though I've declared conflict of interest and noted that they've been managed in accordance with the Cabinet Manual. These stories are still persisting, Mahuta says. Hipkins on Wednesday says the appropriate course of action, it was the appropriate course of action, although he did not see, quote, any evidence at all that any ministers have been involved in any of the decisions regarding Minister Mahuta's family. Hipkins was fired up about the matter in the House on Wednesday afternoon, interjecting during question time with an apparent reference to former Finance Minister Bill English's brother being provided government appointments. Let's talk about Bill English's family, shall we? Hipkins said, suggesting English's family were treated differently because they're white. Now, we'll keep going, but the first thing is, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. It's not a defense to say that's whataboutism, right? We don't stand for whataboutism. It's not defense to say you guys did it so we can do it too, right? So let's make that very clear from the start that whether this is right or wrong, true or false, if there's something here or not, it is not a defense to say Bill English did it. That's not a defense. That doesn't prove innocence or not. So it's. I know the House gets a bit argy-bargy, but let's be fair. That's not a compelling argument, Chewy. Shall we put it that way?
Yeah. No, I think that's a bit of a long bow to draw.
Yeah. All right, shall I keep going? Acting Prime Minister Grant Robertson said he had, quote, absolutely no evidence that supported claims that proper processes had not been followed. There is absolutely no suggestion that Minister Mahuta had done anything wrong, or indeed any other minister. National Party Public Service spokesperson Simeon Brown, your favourite, Chewy, your favourite and mine, said he was pleased an investigation was underway as there were serious issues needing resolved. Well, I guess that's the allegation, isn't it? He had twice written to the Commission seeking an investigation into possible conflicts of interest before Hipkins sent his letter. ACT Party leader, your favourite of mine, David Seymour, said Hughes should have launched a more fulsome inquiry, but he trusted the Commission to, quote, get to the bottom of this. When you have a government working group with, and this is where I got the number from, Chewy, 3 out of 5 members or the relatives, I guess it should be are the relatives of a minister, you've either got an incredible talented whānau or a real problem with the appointment process, he said. Now, again, to be fair, There are, and I'm sorry, I desperately am sorry to use another sporting analogy to you, Chewy, but there are 3 Barrett brothers in the All Blacks, right? I'm not saying that because it's the number 3. What I'm saying is it is possible to have an anomaly where you have 3 of a family who are the best qualified for the job. That is possible. So to be fair again, we're being fair kind of with National before, saying it's not a good defence from Labour. But now to be fair to the working group, just because there are 3 members from one, and what does family mean within Māori? Whānau, iwi, hapu, what is it? I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't mean necessarily they're not the most qualified. Just like I think in the starting lineup this weekend, there'll be 3 Barrett brothers out of 150,000 rugby players in the country. So just to be fair, both ways.
And it would be my hope that parliamentary process is clear enough that that can be managed, right?
Yeah, you would hope so. But I mean, look, I'll come to the perception, because we often say perception is reality here. And there's a perception here, in my opinion, that's not very good. But we'll get to that in a second. Now, when we say perception is reality, we're also not saying necessarily that's the truth or that's accurate. But in politics, the perception of something to the voting public is the reality. So whether there is something going on here, there is something to be held accountable or not, the perception here is not good. So that whether there is or isn't something inappropriate, that's still to be determined. But the perception for Labour and for Nanaia Mahuta is not good. So the last little bit I highlighted was Mahuta has at times held associate minister portfolios, which gave her oversight of 3 of the departments that had contracts with her husband and had previously declared a conflict of interest as per she had previously declared that she had a conflict of interest as per the cabinet manual. So Minister Mahuta is saying, I followed the book, I did it all properly, it's all above board. Now, then there's a question about perception. I've got some audio to play as well, which we can get to, but now that you've heard sort of the whole story again there, Chewy, do you want to jump in and offer anything on that?
Yeah, look, the fact that she's declared a conflict of interest for me is an indication that there's not something sneaky going on there. But yeah, I think when you're talking about perception and that sort of thing, that's what counts, right? I mean, you've got like the political obsessives like us and everybody in the chat here, but what's going to get the cut through to the voting public? They're going to hear that there's this potential. They're not necessarily like, what are they going to hear more, the accusation or the result of the investigation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the headline they're saying today. But look, the other thing that's really clear is we also believe, and I'm saying we too, because we've had this conversation, that if someone is in a position of power, that can influence other decisions that come along under that. Whether it's something to do with, a sexual immorality thing, whether it's something to do with business, whether it's something to, so if you are in a position of power, let's say a minister of the crown, and there is a working group somewhere adjacent to your position, your influence of power may impact that working group, which is why I think that this is actually quite a bad look for Labour right now. And if it was me, it would be a really easy clear up. We can think about Judith Collins and her husband with the milk people and all that kind of stuff. And obviously there was something with Bill English. So this thing happens. Why don't they just put into the handbook, I'm sorry, immediate family can't get contracts from government agencies. And if your business is so big that you rely on government agencies, then maybe you can't have a family member who's a minister. That just would seem to clear all of this up immediately, and there'd be no conflicts of interest. Because with a conflict of interest, even if it's declared, doesn't mean there's still not pressure on a group simply because of the power imbalance. And we know power imbalance can bring pressure. We know power imbalance can make decisions that someone makes not appropriate. So I think they need to make this within government cleaner. And I think no matter what they do, this is not going to look good for Labour, even if they are officially cleared. We talked about National the other day using particularly accurate sentences, that it wasn't like with Uffendale, it wasn't as the media reported. So they've officially kind of got past that, but it's still not a good look. So I think for Labour, they may officially get past this, but it's not a good look. And I actually think it's really, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of husbands, wives, sons, daughters, parents getting contracts from government where you have an influence in government. There is definitely a conflict of interest and a power imbalance there that I think is potentially dangerous.
Yeah, okay. I could be convinced on that. I mean, I don't like where this allegation has come from, and and how it's being used and that sort of thing. But I think the comparison between the two sort of investigations, and we were talking about integrity and all of that sort of thing yesterday. I think it's some, I haven't done enough reading on it, to be honest. But yeah, I agree. The perception and the optics on it, potentially pretty damaging.
Well, in some level, although we have more information because, Christopher Luxon spoke of it, but in some level, what we're talking about with Uffindale is just perception as well, because we don't know the inner workings. Like, we've drawn some conclusions based on what hasn't been offered and what hasn't been said, but we don't actually know that. It is about what we're perceiving, right? It's perception. There is a perception here of an imbalance of power. There's a perception here of inappropriate action with family members on decision-making boards. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. I'm not making any accusations. We don't know, but the perception, especially in the eyes of the voter, is reality. So the eyes of the voter, I think many of them, not just, the National Party supporters will already be against it, but I'm not a National Party supporter. Oh, sorry. I let the cat out of the bag. But the perception's not good. Now, if there is something proven something wrong has been done, like I was going to say immoral, it's the wrong word, and it's not necessarily illegal, but inappropriate done, against the handbook or whatever, then there should be consequences with that. But even if there's not, and they pick their words carefully, just like Christopher Luxon did, it doesn't mean they'll be in the clear. And it actually doesn't mean that maybe something didn't happen that shouldn't have happened. We've already talked about it. You set those terms of reference, you set the parameters of what the investigation is going to do. It somewhat puts the thumb on the scale and helps you get the outcome you want. Much easier, much cleaner, just to not allow family members to get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, whatever the amount is, from a government agency that you have some power within. That's the actual solution here.
So would there be any potential negative consequences of that, though?
Well, there would be, but there are sometimes criteria in life that exclude you from doing things or being things. If you had a partner, Chewy, if your partner made $3 million a year from government contracts, right? You could either choose to be a minister in the Crown and they have to give those contracts up, or you could keep those contracts, your partner could keep those contracts, and you couldn't be a minister of the Crown. I actually don't think that's we all make hard choices. Look, for fuck's sake, we can't now start going, hard choices are difficult when we've just spent two years, 18 months saying people have been making hard choices around vaccines and stuff. I've been ardently pushing that through. This has been a choice. No one's been forced. Yes, it's been a hard choice. We can't now go, we shouldn't really make them choose for this. It would be inconsistent from me, and I think inappropriate. There are always going to be some things that exclude people from sectors of society. What I'm saying is, if you are connected to massive amounts of contracts from the government, I think that should exclude you from being a minister. Now, if you want to be an opposition MP, if you want to be a backbencher, if you want to be an MP, I think even there could be some kind of conflicts here, but fine. But I'm talking about being a minister. That should just exclude you. Make a choice.
Yep. Hey, I just want to acknowledge some of the chat that's going on. I might have used a phrase there that has landed very, very poorly.
Oh, I missed it then. What did you say?
When I referred to the closeness of family with Māori.
Yeah.
There's someone in the comments suggesting that I was talking about incest. That is certainly not what was intended.
Well, I didn't read it that way.
Talking about the fact that Māori have a smaller population base.
Right. So you're basically saying Māori to New Zealand is like New Zealand to the world. Yeah. Like it's not 6 degrees of separation. It's like 1 degree of separation. And
just to absolutely clarify that, I could see someone really, really kicking off there, and I just want to reassure you that was not my intention. Probably a really badly used phrase. So I apologize there. And I guess that's kind of what I was getting at with negative consequences. In Nanaia Mahuta, we have a very, very strong minister. And I guess my question is, these people in the working group, are they doing good work? You know, what's going to be the negative consequence there? Are we going to lose a really good minister who's right across her portfolio, or are we going to lose a lot of knowledge in that working group? It's a hard choice, you know.
Well, but there are hard choices we make all the time.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Look, I mean, like, it's a little bit like, you know, if you're the prime minister, if you've got stocks and that kind of stuff, it has to go into a blind account that you can't control. How come the prime minister has to put their stocks and bonds into a blind account that you have no control over, but a minister can still have a partner in the bed next to them at nighttime making decisions that financially advantages both people? Now, I said minister there because we could bring up Judith Collins, we could bring up Bill English. I'm not actually throwing this just at Nanaia Mahuta. I'm just saying ministers, full stop. I think there's always a conflict of interest there. There's always a thumb on the scale to some level, and there's certainly always an imbalance of power. And I don't think that's appropriate. I really don't.
I think concern and investigation it's just good government. You know, it's just like, even if there's a skerrick of, you know, potential impropriety, yeah, cool, call on the dogs, let's have a look at it. But again, you might have just offended someone by referencing investigators with dogs. Like, what are you saying? No, that's cool. Yeah, I get it. You've also got, like, there's people mentioning what went on with Judith Collins. You know, yes, there's whataboutism in there, but there's also don't throw rocks if you're in a glass house. I mean, that's politics down to a T, right?
Yeah. All right. So when I'm Prime Minister, Chewy, in the year 20, go fuck yourself.
Can I be the sporting minister?
You will be the minister and fart of sports ball.
I tell you what, if you thought John Key's 3-way handshake was bad, I will do something far, far worse.
And just the word docking comes to mind for some reason. I'm not sure why.
They won't want that Rugby World Cup back afterwards.
When I'm Prime Minister, I'm going to cancel contracts to families if you're a Minister of the Crown. And I'm going to make it real specific of immediate family. And I'm going to draw a line as to where that stops. And I think siblings, parents, and any siblings or parents by marriage. So there you go. I'm drawing that line in the sand. You can't do it. And then you're going to have to decide, do you want those big fat ass contracts? Or do you want to be a Minister of the Crown? Up to you. Are you voting for me? Who's voting for me? No one. No one's voting for me. Hey, let's get a little bit of video on this as well, just to get a gist of what's being said about it in the House as well, because the minister speaks to this conversation as well. So this is what's being said by politicians when they were in the House around the scrum.
New Zealanders have extremely high standards over how taxpayers' money is used. And
I mean, to be honest, though, this is where you like roll your eyes and go, yeah, this is your narrative and it's handy. The thing is, it's like, yeah, it's yeah, what you're saying is true technically, but you're just going to break it as soon as you're in about how New Zealanders handle their money. But yeah, we'll get through Simeon Brown and then we'll get to Nanaia Mahuta.
And so I wrote the letters to ask for an investigation to make sure that the conflicts of interest, or perceived conflicts of interest which exist, were managed appropriately, and the procurement processes were too.
Is it fulsome enough, their agreement, to look into this?
Well, look, I did ask for an inquiry. This is more of an investigation. To be honest, I think an inquiry would have more powers attached to be able to actually get that information and make sure it was as full and fulsome as possible. And so, look, ultimately that's what I asked for. This is at least something which is going to look into these issues to try and get to the bottom of it, to make sure that taxpayers' money is being respected appropriately here in New Zealand.
It's concerned me for some time that even though I have declared conflicts of interest and noted that they've been managed in accordance with the Cabinet Manual, these stories are still persisting. I raised my concerns with Minister Hipkins verbally on the 12th of this month, and then wrote a letter to ask that he have a look at that. So I'm very pleased with the outcome. At least 3 of the government departments, it's evident that there is an inconsistent approach to the way in which conflicts of interest have been managed.
Oh, stand by. Buffering. Come on. What's going on? Come on.
Of interest have been managed by them. That is a matter at departmental level. That's why I'm pleased that the Public Service Commission is having a look at this.
Why do you feel like you're being targeted specifically for this?
Oh, look, as I say, there's all sorts of motivations, but I've been very clear every step of the way. I've been assiduous in declaring conflicts of interest. They've been managed appropriately in accordance with the Cabinet Manual. It's very clear that of all the issues that have been raised, I had no say.
Sorry about this.
Need to give your router a kick. Maybe get a router from the 2000s.
Shut up, Dick. Don't you bring that up. Anyway, look, we'll leave it there so we don't have to sit around. But Chewy, she does wrap up that part of the conversation talking about, hinting at, if not blatantly saying, that there's a racial issue to this. She talks about platforms where the comments are being made, the non-mainstream platforms. Obviously, she's talking about things like Rumble and Telegram and that kind of stuff. And I'll just respond by this, right? For me, it's about whether there has been impropriety here or not, right? If there has been, then there has been. If there hasn't been, then there hasn't been. I struggle a little bit with that's the rationale behind it, rather than the rationale behind it is just basically right wingers wanting to do it for whatever reason. And one of the reasons I struggle a little bit behind that's the reason behind it is Judith Collins. You know, it's not just happening to Māori. It's happening to other people. It's like I was talking to a particular mayoralty asshole candidate the other day, and one of the things he said that makes him feel intimidating to other people is he's white. He used that phrase, and I'm like, but hang on, there's lots of other white people in councils, and they're not seen as intimidating. So how is that attribute equal that thing? What I'm saying here is, how does this attribute you're saying equals the Dobbin as opposed to what's actually happened? And the only way we'll find that out, like if they come back completely exonerated and nothing to see here, then I say let's investigate that and see if that's the reason behind it. If they come back and it's muddy and it's murky and something else is going on, then that's what the rationale for people making the complaints, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. For me, it's like, has there been impropriety? That's what I'm interested in.
Yep. No, and look, I think that's fair. You know, I want a squeaky clean government as much as anybody does. And look, if this highlights that the rules are inconsistent or not fit for purpose, or maybe they haven't been looked at since 1963, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But again, I think the comparison between, you know, Ardern has said we need they want to be the most transparent government.
Yeah, of course.
Here is their opportunity to show it, and they can turn around and go, here's our investigation, and here's things like a term of reference or what we found out and why it happened and why it's okay or why it's not. And then you can draw your own lines between somebody else's investigation. Thank you.
Yeah. And look, Gareth got me. I have to cancel my whole thoughts around this because Gareth says, what about, is it whāngai, siblings or parents? What about stepchildren who are already ministers? Oh, fuck, I have to give it all up now. But the basic idea is you could get rid of these conflicts of interest pretty easily by not awarding contracts to family members, wherever you decide to draw the line. I mean, husband's a pretty close line. Because the thing about husband or partner is that not only impacts a family member, but it actually financially impacts you. Because if husband gets the income, then you as minister get the benefits from that income. That's very close. If it was son or daughter who live in a different part of the country, and there's one step removed. But partner, that means all of that money comes into your joint bank account, so to speak, and funds the cars that you guys probably drive. So that there is a definite out, and I think that would be easy to put onto the governmental books for everybody, and then you won't have these kinds of conflicts of interest anymore. And I think fair is fair. We always say walk and chew gum, and I think that this is a bad look, and I think that the government of the day needs to sort this out, and I don't think they should be awarding contracts, even if at the moment it's above board. I remember a tennis player once getting done for drug use, and she was done in the January, and the December, the drug that she got done for was legal to use, and then there was a change and it wasn't legal to use, and I always felt a bit bad for her because it was legal, and then it became not legal within the confines of the Professional Tennis Association, a female tennis player. And I think at the moment this is legal, like within the confines of the handbook. Even if it is, the potential for conflict or the potential for the thumb to be on the scale or the potential for an imbalance of power being there should make this illegal. We should wipe the slate of it and not allow, maybe this is the line, not allow a financial advantage to directly affect you, the minister, i.e. into your joint bank accounts from a contract from the government. That's a pretty easy line to draw if there was nothing else. And that could be done like that.